Go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's so good to talk to you, Cameron and Joan and Michael and Linda, about ourselves. There's nothing better than when you can finally get a chance to talk about yourself. And so I think that it was a really great idea. And that we had, quite a lot of hoo-ha going on about how many wheels we wanted to use and so forth. But we're keeping it simple, just so that it's easier for all of us to get a grip on what the core essence in the natal horoscopes that we're sharing of our own, and and also sharing, what the experience is, because here we are in the middle. I don't know if it's the middle or the end or the start of COVID, and so here we are at a time when we can communicate finally with each other via this medium, which is fantastic. Otherwise, it would be, it would just be really, really isolated and really isolating, lonely for people. So it's so great that we can get together and talk astrology. And I'm really pleased that we have three people with really interesting horoscopes. I was looking at them and not too closely at first. I wanted to wait until we actually got to the show. And so that's what we're doing now. And I'm meant to begin with my own natal chart. And with my chart, um, I have my own chart represented here on my desk. So I'm looking at it as well as my natal chart that you see there sitting. You'll see that I was born right at dawn, like smack at, because it's an exact time. My father was an intern at the hospital when I was being born. And so the time is exact, 7:21 a.m. in Vancouver, British Columbia. And that was exactly the sun rising. And I often sort of jokingly like to say that when I was born, I looked out and I saw the sunrise and Jupiter and Venus rising. And I thought, oh, goody, parties, lots of friends, travel of the world, et cetera, et cetera. And quite frankly, it has part of a great deal of my life has been that. But it's also been really difficult because the sun is born with exact square to Pluto and Mars, the midpoint, and Saturn. So I've got that famous conjunction of 1947, Mars, Pluto, and Saturn together. But it was born when Sun and Chiron were rising, and Mercury falls in there as well as a sextile or a square to Pluto. And then just by default, it does hit as it progressed correct years ago. And it's now well past the squares. So I've managed to get through that. And the Jupiter Venus in Sagittarius is my philosophy. And I see that as being possibly the best thing that is in my best aspect in my horoscope, because it gives me the sense of humor and the capacity to visualize things that people are saying. And so I can find uh, amusing things about almost everything. So it's almost as if I was born to have fun, but it would be limited by the sun square Mars, Saturn, and Pluto, in that I can't have too much fun or I might end up overdoing it, which I did do in the 60s, mind you. Remember, I am 73, so, I've got a bit of a history. And my history has been, really anti-establishment. And my history was involved in things like creating the big um, famous Woodstock. Our group was the one who set it all up and got police involved as friends, and helping us with making sure that everybody was safe and that there was no problem. We had, when you've got like several thousand, many thousand people all together in one space for 3 days, anything can happen, and basically nothing really bad happened. It was really well controlled, and that I was in part of that creation of the. I became a cop. I mean, it was when we were having a meeting with the police in Woodstock, who were going to be part of our party, guardians, they'd all be there in plain clothes and not do anything unless somebody was violent. But there was no violence, so they became our friends, and we all got Sullivan County because it was Woodstock was held in Sullivan County, so we got Sullivan County badges, which I still have, and it's a police badge, so it's quite amusing. So part of my life has been really a secret, which I'm not going to share, and part of my life has been just nothing but open-mindedness and openness to anybody and everything that will come my way. And I was always very, up for adventure and still am, but I don't travel as much because I've traveled endlessly and I've lived in many countries, like lived in them, not just visited, but actually was residing as a resident in several countries. That's the Jupiter, Venus, and Sagittarius. And also the Mars, Pluto, and Saturn. Mars, Saturn, and Pluto, if I do it in order, um, is also in the ninth house. And so with that there, that has a lot to do with my whole um, capacity to verbalize and write in ways. I think I write better than I can verbalize, but at the same time, I am a very good, I'm a good writer. I can tell you that. I can be honest about that. And that's my Virgo midheaven. But I'm also a good editor because I edited in foreign country, London, the Arcana series of books that came out. I published 30 books of some of the best minds in our career when I was living in London. And I also made my closest friendships were two men. I had two men in my life who were very, very, very close to me. They were gay, and they both died. My father died when I was in London. It was like quite a time. It was both the best and the worst of times, as they say. And so my foreign country contacts are really strong. And I actually have some transits that are really valuable too right now. And I was wondering if maybe I should be talking about those, Linda, or is that for another time? Ah, okay. Well, here's the big picture of the transits. And it's got them all in there. And I've got my chart just sitting here on my desk looking at it as well. And I noticed that my natal year, sorry, so start with Uranus, which is opposite to the planet Mercury. And it's also, and therefore, quincunx to my moon. And so Uranus opposite Mercury and quincunx my moon exactly says that major adjustments around my thinking, my communications with people, um, my privacy, my secrets, the things that I keep secret. I'm about to write my memoirs because my kids are forcing me into it, guilt tripping me like crazy. Like, how can you die, Mom, without us knowing who you are, how you got to be who you are? I mean, they've got the stories, but they don't have the writing. So I'm supposed to do that. And the Mars, Saturn, and Pluto in my ninth house are being emphasized by the progress moon, as you see, progress moon at 25 Leo. So for the last 6 months, it's been transiting by Pluto, Mars, and Saturn in the ninth house. So I mean, it makes sense that I'm beginning some pressure to do some more authorship. And I don't really want to write another astrology book because I feel like I've done my job with that. And it's been my passion. And so I have to somehow adapt to not just the demands of my kids, but my own needs to do it, because with this progressed sun or transiting sun today, conjunct Venus, which is a beautiful aspect, is actually in a really nice aspect, a trine to my Jupiter Venus. And so I thought, well, that's really pleasant. It's nothing to necessarily write on about, but the other thing that I wanted to point out, though, is I've spent most of my time looking at the outer planets, the Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, because the transit of them, because they are really doing some exact aspects. And as you can see really clearly, that the transit of Uranus is exactly opposite my natal Mercury. So my mind is changing almost all the time. It really is. It's evolving very rapidly in a way which I'm not really sure that where that will actually emerge out, what the results will be, because when you have an outer planet in a transit to your natal horoscope, you often don't know until it's over exactly what it is that's going on. And so I would just assure you that if you're concerned when you see it on a planet coming up, like for example, natal net or my natal um, Uranus is being quincunxed by Neptune. Can you go, yeah, Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. So Neptune here is at 21 Pisces. And so it's actually in a quincunx to my Saturn and Mars. Yeah. So the planet that has to do with imagination and creativity in art form and is actually in a quincunx to Saturn and Mars. So I have to confess that I'm not really sure what I would say about that myself, but I would tell a client that they have to make some very deep, deep spiritual connections with their higher mind, Neptune. It can't just be, a belief system where you throw the I Ching every day, or, you have a habit of meditation. There's something about the Neptune quincunx to my Mars and Saturn that says you've got to go deeper, much deeper than you're going. You can't be superficial. You've got to be very, at the bottom of the ocean, not just floating on the surface. And then I need to be really, really attentive to my imagination, Neptune, and how I might be able to write something that, say, my kids would really appreciate that. In fact, as I'm speaking, I'm feeling a little more confident about doing something like that. So this workshop that we're doing today is like really quite phenomenal, because I'm not used to doing this, like talking to people about my chart. I mean, I very rarely do. So we're moving from Uranus opposite Mercury, which is creating a lot of positive stuff, because on one hand, um, it's very possible that my kids will be able to buy the house that I'm renting, in which case I'd actually be able to live in it and pay them some rent, their mortgage, until I died, which would be a blessing. And so there's a lot of alternative action going on under the surface, 12th house to the 6th house, of really working hard on changing my domestic situation, Uranus opposite Mercury, Chiron, and the Sun. And so I'm looking forward to that. And also, the Uranus is at 8 degrees. It's quincunx my moon. Right, it's quincunx my natal moon. And quincunxes are awkward. They're they're almost like a semi-sextile, where you have just 10, 15, or 1 degree. One planet is a degree from another planet. So that if you have a quincunx, then it talks about having to make a major adjustment to be able to see what's actually going on. And so I can see that my mind is going through a tremendous amount of change, and that my way of thinking has really had to, especially at my age now. I'm 73. And as a result of being that, concurrent with it come a whole nother state of consciousness. And Linda and I were just talking about that beforehand, before we all got on. And so the Uranus opposite Mercury could make me, I'm not being self-congratulatory or anything, but it could make me brilliant if I did actually begin to write. That it would be something so unusual and so different. And I actually thought, well, maybe I should just have the first line of my story, my book, on myself, my autobiography, where it should say, I was born at not November 9th, 1947, 7:21 a.m. in Vancouver, British Columbia, period. And that would be my starting line. And I haven't been able to follow it up with anything else. So, but I have made notes. I've been working very hard on making a timeline. So I've got 19 sections. There's more than that because my life has been outrageously reactive. I was very involved in the movement in the Vietnam War, very much involved in that. We had the hog farm, which was a great place for a very few of us. It was a small gathering of people that we lived together for years. And they have still got land in California, and a lot of we have reunions. We've had 55-year reunion already, so that's been a long time having spent that time in essentially with a group of people who are reactive and responsive to the collective unconscious, Mars, Saturn, Pluto in the 9th house, and so I'm quite susceptible to the way people think. And I'm very careful about sharing my own information. You know, I don't mind talking about myself, but I mean, it's not very often that I do. And so with the transit of Neptune at 21 Pisces, it's in a quincunx to the natal Mars, Saturn, and Pluto. You have to include Pluto because we're running, like when you have a conjunction like this where it runs from 14 to 22, you wouldn't consider 14 to 22 as being a conjunction, but because they run all together, they are a conjunction. And so by natal, my transiting Neptune is now exactly quincunx my Mars and Saturn midpoint. And so it's trying to dissolve the old, hard, life is difficult, I can't write. It's trying to dissolve that and make it much more inspired. Okay, so I'm trying. I think Neptune is working towards my own coming to terms with my own inspiration. I'm actually getting this as I'm speaking. I didn't practice this, I promise you. And then I've got Pluto at 26 Capricorn by transit, and it's involved in a quincunx to Uranus. So we've got Uranus by transit opposite my natal Mercury with Pluto in a quincunx to it, or Neptune, sorry, Pluto quincunx my Uranus, not my Neptune. Yeah, Pluto quincunx Uranus. Well, that's an outer planetary connection, and it's not something that I'm fully conscious of what's going on. And I think that would be about right to think, well, if you've got Pluto in a quincunx to Uranus and in another quincunx to Saturn, because Saturn is sextile Uranus. So basically, Pluto is sitting at the midpoint of my Uranus and this whole stellium here, the Saturn especially. So I'm having to make some major adjustments between my attitude about freedom and control and restriction. Now, by restriction, I don't mean being held back. I mean by holding myself back from writing my philosophy and my belief system in my own words. And with a 3-degree of Virgo midheaven, that talks about something really important that Noel Till pointed out in my chart in an article that he wrote, that, it's the only Earth that I've got. It has emerged out of the midheaven to become an editor, an author, an advisor, a consultant, and everything that has to do with Virgo, a helper, a healer, a supporter, because my IC is 3 Pisces, which falls at the midpoint of Saturn and Mercury, which is and I have to notice here something that I didn't mention, and that was that my progressed sun is 0 Aquarius. My progressed Mercury is 12 degrees of Aquarius. And then my progressed Venus is 4 degrees of Pisces. So my progressed Venus has moved from 3 Sag to 4 Pisces, and it's right on my IC. So this I would have to say in plain language, if I were talking to a client, I'd say, you know, you will get that house. It will work. You'll be safe. You won't have to move again. And that you'll be able to buy this place with your kids, because the lady would like to be able to sell it, and when we offered her the opportunity for us to do it, she said that would be great. I just won't even think about it until you get it together to do that. So I may be moving into my own house while I'm living in it, if you will. Does anybody have any questions about what I've been saying so far?
I don't, but I was looking at your chart, and the way that it felt like it was just blossoming forth from you. That was beautiful. So I just appreciate all that. That's all I would say.
Cameron, thank you. That's how I do people's charts. Usually I don't speak so quickly, but that's what I do. I integrate and 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 evolve the information that is coming out of the chart and unifying it in ways which are really um, palatable, that you can actually understand. To me, it's poetry. Yeah, the that doing a horoscope for somebody is like writing a poem and then reciting the poem to them. And so, thank you for noticing that my unique way of going about doing it. I really appreciate that, Cameron. Thank you. Did anybody else notice anything, or did you notice anything that you might want to let me know about, that I should know about, that I didn't mention?
Well, I did, this is Michael, I did notice a couple things. And you've kind of addressed it, but I have some questions, I guess, along with it. I'm looking at the transiting Mars and North Node. The transiting Mars having the opposition to the Venus and Jupiter, and the transiting node is about to conjunct the Venus Jupiter. Okay, so what I'm feeling from this is that all your previous gifts that you've developed, throughout your life, and whatever you brought with you, it's ready now for a new level of sense of self and personal expression in how you experience and express your love and values into the world. So it seems like you're like ready, if you haven't already started, but like a new, I don't know about chapter, but a new level of expressing this sort of thing.
Thank you. That confirms what my feeling is. I feel like I'm on the threshold of something really big and really important. I mean, for me, not for everybody else, but for me. But when you mentioned the business of Mars and the North Node being in a, actually in a quincunx to my sun, but also basically exactly trying my moon and Neptune. Mars is exactly trine Neptune. I think that what you're saying is that I might be able to find parts of myself that have been sleeping or unconscious, and be able to bring them out into the open 7th house area where for other people, so they can get to know me in a way in which they've never known me before. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, that's true. If I may continue,
Please.
with this groupings of 3 things: the transiting Uranus squaring the transiting Saturn, this trining your natal moon and Neptune. But the transiting Saturn is also quincunx to your moon, the natal moon and Neptune. So well, it's more like new insights through your own self-questioning. And out of this self-questioning, getting, being inspired by a new sense of purpose, finding new ways of sharing the wisdom from what you've gleaned from, from whatever woundedness that you've carried in your life and whatever wisdom has come out of that. So, you have a lot to give yet.
Thank you. That's a really important comment because I didn't get that. Did you? I wanted to say that I actually came out of a very troubled family. Childhood, I was abused, not sexually, but my mother was absolutely gorgeous, absolutely fantastic, but she was also crazy. And so she used to beat me. And so I was abused as a child. And then in the way she treated my father when they were divorced and how he wasn't allowed to see me until, except for once every year. And then she would drive all the way from Vancouver to LA to spy on it. It was just insane. So, I mean, I had an extremely, extremely difficult and very traumatic childhood. And so out of that was birthed my consciousness to make up my mind, because I have two beautiful daughters who are now 50 and 51, 52. And I promised myself that when I had my kids, I was never going to beat them, wasn't going to scream at them. I just made all these promises, which I kept. And they're great. And now I've got 3 grandchildren, all of whom it's like every generation is improving itself. And I'm looking at that generational thing as this Mars, Saturn, and Pluto in my 9th house saying, I came out of a harsh background, and I wanted to turn it into something more like the Jupiter Venus, where it would be, where people were safe, where my children were safe. And I did that. And being an astrologer, I was working at home, so I was always at home when they came home from school. And, I made it a really nice, happy kind of situation. Not to say that they didn't get, hauled out once in a while, because that was obviously the case once they came in at 2 a.m. And I said, that's the last time that you'll ever do that, because if you do it again, you're never going to get to go out again. And so they were just like sort of 15 and 16 at the time. So they were old enough to recognize, yes, we blew it. I'm sorry. So, I mean, I raised a good family. I love my kids. They're my best friends.
I noticed 2 things that I found interesting. One, I was going to ask you about childhood. First of all, with the Neptune and Pisces in the 4th house, I knew there had to be some funkiness going on, but also because of your Scorpio South node. I like nodes, and Scorpio South node indicating a drama and passion and activity, and now you keep talking about this house, and it sounds like a very good transition from Scorpio to Taurus, which is obviously where we should be going on our journeys, to take the good from the South node and move it into the North. But you keep speaking of this home and as sort of this respite, if you will, this place that you are very much looking forward to. And that struck me as very Taurian in nature. And also I thought the Scorpio South node, I think I heard you say at least 4 or 5 times about, not revealing parts of yourself. And I was just sort of chuckling, saying, oh, how Scorpio is that? But I really saw the movement, if you will, into the Taurus.
The Taurus North Node. Yes. I feel quite safe with our group. And it's also, astrology is a truth teller. So to, withhold any information, I mean, aside from, deep personal stuff, there's nothing wrong with being able to discuss your chart with groups. It sounds it's a wonderful opportunity here. And I noticed Vesta has been stuck in there at 28 Cancer. Anybody have any ideas about what Vesta at the cusp of the 9th house is?
To me, that gives you more of the drive to travel, right? Vesta, the burning heart's desire. Ninth house is literally right where we go out into the world.
And I've
So-
traveled so many countries.
Right.
I've been everywhere. I lived in the Middle East for like a year. It was just unbelievable. Yeah, I've been everywhere pretty much, and traveled to Australia to lecture. I've been in Greece, which is my second home as far as I'm concerned, Athens. So that's what Vesta has to do in Cancer. In the ninth house is making homes, various.
I think also that it's the way that you really hold your truth to it. You really nurture your truth,
Yes.
and you give it out to the world. The Vesta is the keeper of the sacred flame in the temple.
That's right.
Yeah.
I see, because I don't use the asteroids and the goddesses very much at all. And so when I just noticed that now, and I thought, gee, maybe somebody can tell me more about what that is. And I guess it has to do with this, me talking a lot about my domestic life as a child, which was abusive and terrible, except when I was with my dad, which it wasn't. It was adventurous and magnificent. We founded free clinics all through the Honduras, because he was one of these kind of doctors who did everything. Founded the Children's Hospital in Burbank, California, and went to the Barrio in East LA to look after pregnant women. He was really into pregnant women, and so I've got two sides to me. Two sides are split. One is abusive, and the other one is nurturing, and towards myself, not to other people.
So Erin, thank you so much. Let's move to the next chart.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you, everyone. Wow.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. Thanks everybody for being here. As everybody can see,
You have a lot of planets in Capricorn. Gosh, I just noticed that.
yeah, I have this huge stellium in Capricorn, and throughout my life with that, it's just been about, and even that being in the first house, it's just been about me defining things for myself and literally doing whatever I think I want to do. That's something that's been so big and highlighted in my life throughout time. It's just with all that stuff in Capricorn, it's just like I like learning like about like social norms. That has been so huge, and like the conditioning that we're in currently in this reality. Oh man, it's almost endless for me. It feels like, and I also love that it's all in the first house, because with the first house in evolutionary astrology, often when we talk about like a trial and error process or something that is like just becoming instinctually. And when I found that out, it was so relieving for me, because I'm like, oh, all I have to do is just be here now and be present, so that I can allow things to unfold over time, so that I can decondition myself or recondition myself or structure my life and reality like as I see fit. Because there's been so many distortions that I've seen, even just like as a young child. I definitely had a father who was like ran the household like a businessman on some level, and there was always this like sensitivity that I had to everybody in the family and just inside of myself internally that like wanted things to not be so rigid. But that was really highlighted in my life. And I also think that it's really interesting with my South Node being in Leo, and then my moon being in the fifth house, and then the sun being conjunct my North Node. All these things are highlighting like something about like being seen and like how I express myself, right? Like that fifth house having that same frequency and energy of Leo and the sun. So it's like, and also just thinking about like the nodal axis of the lunar nodes always being present with the moon, and the moon being in the fifth house having to do more with like a Leo sun expression, the South Node being in Leo, and then the North Node being conjunct the sun. It's like this trajectory or arc that I'm on, has so much to do with like expression and how I see things. And I also feel like for me personally, because I do energy work as well, it is a lot about like what is illumination in this reality, and what is illumination in life. Like how can you experience like gnosis, and how can we shine the light of truth onto things in this reality. Um, Also, something that I always feel into is this Jupiter retrograde on my descendant opposite my Mars in my first house. And just like sometimes how when I was younger, I would oftentimes express my own ideas to others, and they would just get like pushed back on me, and it would just be like a war between like other people's beliefs and like how I assert myself. That's something that I always have felt into really deeply. Um, so I've been like really working with the asteroids a lot lately. So I want to kind of talk about those in my chart with this palace in the third house. You know, I've been going on exploration lately of going back in time and looking towards Egyptian Neteru, or they would call them like Egyptian deities. And there's a Egyptian deity called Neith, and it's the weaver. It weaves things into this reality. So I've been feeling into my palace, and like the information and the content that I create oftentimes is about how I'm using my intuition and discernment to like weave things into this reality that aren't necessarily already here. It just like bursts forth from my head. Like even in medical astrology, because I practice medical astrology as well, like I've already implemented like new things that weren't being talked about before. So even that Aries piece there is like, it's like pioneering certain things that have come to me through my intuition, and I would have to have discernment to be able to even speak about these things and bring those things forth, because like no one else has said it. Like in the first thing I'm thinking of in my head is like Saturn in medical astrology. The way that I practice it and work with it, it rules the fascia of the body. And through my work with that fascia, I've been able to work with a lot of people here where I live at Memphis, Tennessee, to like release long-term issues and tension that many would suppose that can't be released. So that's a piece there with the palace. And then also the like my Chiron, I love my Chiron placement. Just that opposition to Neptune though. I'm so thankful for this Capricorn stellium, because without that Chiron and that Neptune opposition, I would just be so open and sensitive, and it would leave me like very, very ungrounded. But that's all I want to talk about with my natal chart. I'm ready to move to the transit. Or before we go to the transit, I actually would invite anybody, if they have any reflections before we even go to the transit, if y'all picked up on anything or saw anything that y'all would want to comment on.
One thing hi Cameron, it's Erin.
Hey.
I was noticing your Gemini moon, and of course I've noticed the whole thing that you were talking about, but the Gemini moon is very interesting because it gives you the capacity to articulate clearly exactly what it is that you're feeling. And I would definitely trust you with my horoscope to come to you as a client, because you're, if anything, rigidly, um, rigorous about the way you say things and how you speak. Look at all that Capricorn and Mercury right there with Saturn saying, if I'm going to say anything with Venus, it's going to be decent, it's going to be good. It may be hard news, but I'm going to find a way to speak. So the way you can actually use your moon in Gemini through talking and through speaking to people, because it's also sextile. Sorry, what is that? Is that Vesta, the Venus in Aries, or Vesta in Aries?
It's Palace.
Oh, it's Pallas Athena, right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, the moon is sextile that. And I thought, okay, there's the feminine part of you, even though these planets in Capricorn are all feminine based planets. It's a part of you that gives you the gift of being able to speak from a kind of gender issue and being able to really relate to people without gender issues. That's really an important part of your chart as well. Is that the case?
Yeah, that was well said. I even when you know things that like gender issues started becoming more in the mainstream, I was so excited because I was like, I never understood why we were doing this in the first place. It's like I never talked from that place. I never felt from that place, but I always like I would try to learn how to be relatable to people based off of the norms. But when it started coming up and out in the mainstream, I was just like, oh, this is such a relief, you know?
That's really great. That's really
Yeah.
great. I mean, half my family is gay or bi. And so as far as I'm concerned, I don't even understand gender issues as being an issue. And so for me, it's just, kind of qui normal.
Totally. Yeah.
Cameron, I was wondering about the Pluto, Juno in the 11th, and I've always found it that we take a while to, I don't know, recognize or live into our Pluto, because there's often a fear factor because Pluto's always telling us to change, change, change. I'm wondering, have you felt a shift in the 11th house in these group things? Is this something that you shied away from as a kid? And you're coming into them? I'm just always curious about how people realize their Pluto.
Yeah, that's a great reflection there. And I would say that it was at first it was experienced as extremes. So it would be like when I was younger, it didn't matter what any group or any setting period, I would just let out what I felt. And that would make me essentially be exiled from groups oftentimes because I also wasn't always the best at articulating what I felt. So it would just be like really like I would be committed to the truth amongst like a group of people and I would go really deep with it, but maybe sometimes like what I said, what didn't come out the way that it wouldn't be like nuanced. It would just be like something that I really, really felt deeply and I would like feel committed to saying it. And that would get me essentially exiled from groups or yeah, so it'll get me exiled from groups. So then I would go to the polarity and just like feel deeply into the energy of the room and just be committed to my own truth. And in going to that extreme polarity, I would like just essentially outcast myself. Right. So like I would either feel this empowerment of being able to speak it and then like the disempowerment of being exiled, or feel the empowerment of like just holding on to what I really, really feel. And then feeling like the disempowerment of like experiencing myself as an outcast on some level.
But
But in the
looking
past,
for the connection because of Juno, you were looking for connection. And it
totally
wasn't happening.
right. Yeah. And then over the past 6 years, I've been over the last year I haven't worked there, but I worked at a spiritual supply store where I was I'm an herbalist here in Memphis, Tennessee. And there would be groups of people and it would be empowering in that way where I could really say and like go deep with the community, but it would all be on like a one-on-one basis with people. So it would be like I wouldn't have to experience the group dynamics, but I could still be amongst like a community or a group and express myself and have that be seen and recognized and appreciated. And I also found evolutionary astrology, thank God. So it's just like putting that awareness on it and shining that light on it, it will just be like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to go into this feeling of vulnerability or what I perceive as vulnerability so that I can just like move through it in an accelerated process. And also it never hurts when Pluto goes over your whole first house stellium.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that one. Now that was a good 12-year transit. Um,
Oh yeah.
but your
Yeah.
Pluto actually is powerfully aspecting because it involves, almost exact aspect to the midpoint of Neptune and Saturn. But basically, you have Pluto sextile all of those planets in Capricorn because they're tripping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so you're getting and Venus retrograde is all. Here's the thing about Venus retrograde, because I did write about it and I did a lot of research on it. And the Venus retrograde is the person, because it's rare. It's the rarest of retrogrades you get. With Venus retrograde, there's always that feeling of being an outsider. And when it went direct and by progression in your chart would be interesting, because Venus retrograde is always the outsider, the one who's standing, looking and peering in through the window at the party going on inside. And it's also very important to realize that with Venus retrograde, that your interior life, your interior, the love that you share within yourself is always going to be received by other people, but you might not notice it as much as you think. And with Pluto sextiling that Venus, it just strikes me as being a really deep, deep sense of value system that simply cannot be broken, and that you would go against society at any time when you have to.
Yeah, definitely. That's always happening, always relevant for sure.
For sure.
Hmm. Yeah,
Oh, thanks.
indeed. Yeah. So we can go to the transiting chart. Yeah, so something that's just like really apparent for me right now, or really alive for me right now, is this Mars conjunct the North Node in my sixth house. And just like over the last few days, I've had like dry, hot respiratory issue going on. And then like my sinuses flared up as soon as the sun went into Aries as well. So that's just like, that's just so spot on for what's happening right now. And talking more about the nodes, just since the nodes have been in my 12th, my sixth house, you know, a lot of my beliefs, you know, actually I met someone who's becoming one of my teachers and a friend, and he keeps telling me, he's like, why do you believe? Like, what are you believing this for? What are you believing that for? Like, allow yourself to just like be present and know truth. And it was just like so perfect with that South Node there in Sagittarius in my 12th house. It's just like dissolving my like excessive emotional identifications with what I think is true, you know, and moving forward with the North Node there in Gemini, and just, you know, really, really focusing on like discernment and like in my day-to-day life, and like what is truly of service for me and for what I'm doing in the world. And it also has had me adjusting the way that I like label things, and adjusting the way that I write. It has me adjusting the way that I write, and I've started writing too as well. Um, I feel that more is like the Neptune in my third house, because every time I write, literally all I do is just meditate, and then I start writing, and I write for the company Yoga Journal. I write articles for Yoga Journal now, and all I do literally is like a spiritual practice, right? I just meditate and I just write. So that's been a transit that's been really highlighted for me. And I also, as far as the third house goes, that transiting Neptune, I made a whole course last year too, based off of just meditations. I just meditated like for 2 weeks. I just meditated, and everything just came through the whole time. I for days, you know, like some days I didn't even like shower. I just meditated all day and just made this course. And I just, that still kind of blows my mind, honestly. Um, so that's one thing that's been huge for me. That Neptune, I keep feeling into that Neptune. I love that.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say
Only
something?
someone with all that Capricorn could sit and meditate the whole day. I'm just laughing at that. I just see the goat just, I'm gonna meditate the whole day. I just know I will. I love it.
I do that too, but the Neptune transit is just now finishing up the sort of multiple decade transit. It's been hitting all of your Capricorn planets. It's almost as if you were born to experience, because Neptune is now in its final aspect, and transiting Neptune is 21 Pisces, and your Venus is 21 Aquarius, Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
So what you've been doing is you've been letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go all of your life. That's the point. The point of your birth, I think, was to come in here with a tremendous amount of restrictions and social and familial restrictions, and prejudices to actually learn how to let go of all of it. And you've just begun to really, truly absorb the Neptune transit that has been sextiling all that Capricorn and freeing you up.
Totally. Yeah, that's so well said. And
Brilliant.
yeah, and I'm consistently still in that, you know, and even like that, like having that Neptune sextile, all that, and then the Pluto going through all those planets. You know,
Yeah.
I did actually go through since like 2008. Actually around that time I started being a football player, and then so then and then it was the Pluto was going over the Mars and the Uranus, and then once it approximately got to the Neptune, I like stopped playing football and I started moving towards like a yoga practice and like cleansing my body like in like really intense ways that most people probably wouldn't go there. There was like some really intense times there, you know, just like really just transmuting like my body. Like I could like feel it on a cellular level in that being able, you know, it enabled me to be able to let go of things emotionally and attune myself and allow like spiritual energy to move through me and come to me. Also, just a piece about the letting go thing. I don't know how many people are familiar with the planetary nodes, but the planetary nodes in my chart with all that Capricorn there, I also have the south node of my Venus is at 20 degrees Capricorn. The south node of my Mercury is at 21 degrees Capricorn. So then I also have the planetary node of Pluto and Saturn over there too as well. So all those things highlighted from the past, like I have this very finely attuned awareness around what those things were about. Even when I was younger, growing up, like my mom would have to wake me up in certain ways because I would have like dreams of like war and just like being a warrior and just like battle, and I would like wake up swinging, you know. So it's just like those things from the past being like very present in my like my short-term memory, which is Mercury, and in how I related to myself when I was younger, you know, the Venus retrograde, like reviewing how I relate to myself and needing to throw off the old values that were implemented on me, but also just something that I felt like I carried with me. And then it also would like echo, it like echoes a ripple of an echo there from my south node, my south node ruler being conjunct the north node as well. Another thing about the transits right now, uh, Jupiter going through my second house. I mean, just like on a very mundane level, like I have my finances have exploded essentially over the past year. So that's been pretty epic. I love that. And but also coming with that, like a more of a need to be more structured with my finances and also understanding like what do I really value, because like not just it being about money, but like me being a resource for the people in my community as well, and sharing that wealth. That's been really big. And also Saturn is coming towards my sun in and I know a lot of times in astrology we can feel into that, and sometimes Saturn would in some way restrict or limit the sun sometimes, but I just feel into it so much that when I feel into Saturn, especially just coming out of my Saturn return, I keep hearing the word space, right? I mean, no, we talk about Saturn and time, but Saturn can really just be like space, spaciousness, understanding, and mastery. So
Yeah.
for me, it's about mastering like what some people would call like the immortal body, or like the just like my aura or my energy field or the radiance that I can express or bring here in my actual physical body. It's kind of a metaphysical thing, but for me it's actually just it's very very tangible. So making like how can someone increase their vital force, like I've been just trying to master how I can help people and learn and teach how to help people express their vital force in a way that we can change things in the future, right? Like the sun and Aquarius, like moving towards the future, and then Saturn is like restructuring the way that we think about vital force and how that can change things a lot. So that's been really big for me as well.
now that you mentioned that, I'm looking at the transiting Pluto to your natal Saturn, Mercury, and Venus. And this goes, this supports what you're saying, because I see that their inner need, to actualize your authority, okay? And you're finding new power to do so. So now you're getting more possibilities, and you're facing opportunities for exercising your leadership. And as you've opened up, and you've crossed over, so to speak, as you cross the threshold of lessons, it wasn't that long ago you had your Saturn return, and now, Pluto is following suit. And so the way you even think about relationships and the way that you relate, this is all plays part into how you exercise or what you have possible for you to be a leader in your community.
Totally. Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, well said. That's very spot on.
Okay.
Something else.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
just quickly, Cameron, the last point, and then we'll move on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Actually, I feel this feels good. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you. Okay, looks like I'm up. My chart, I've always had comments on two things, maybe three things. One, I have no retrogrades, which some people seem to think that means your life is going to be just hunky and dory. And while I've been extremely lucky, no retrogrades does not transit into no lessons. And so that's one thing. I remember the class I took, we had to all give our charts, and so it's like, who's the one who has no retrogrades? I'm like, oh gosh. So that always struck me as interesting. And the other thing about my chart that I find amusing is I have almost nothing in earth signs. I mean, I have Ceres walking around there in Capricorn, but if you take the major guys, and I never understood, I'm an extremely linear thinker. I am extremely organized. I don't like, nonsense. And I could never figure out, and so my first class, I said, what's the deal? And that's when I learned about the anchors, the first, fourth, eighth, and I'm sorry, 10th house, and those cardinal anchors. And, my teacher said to me, if you didn't have, cardinal rising, cardinal descendant, ACDC as cardinal, you'd be flying all around with all that air and fire. And I said, oh, okay. So I'm really happy that I have those anchors. So that always struck me as interesting. I never much enjoyed my Neptune on the sun. I blamed that for a lot of indecisiveness and not knowing who I was for a very long time. But of course, the Libra rising doesn't help that. But I believe my Mercury and Mars and Libra in 12 has certainly helped my writing and journaling. And the reason I asked you about Pluto, Cameron, is because I obviously am a Pluto 11 baby too, with Jupiter conjunct, and it was many, many years that I always never fit into a group, and that's where the Pluto lack pattern is. But I knew it would come through something, Jupiterian, something bigger than myself, something, and it turned out, of course, to be both astrology and civic groups. But it took a long while for Pluto to loosen up there. And my Uranus in the 10th, with its quirkiness, has been amusing. At times, it has led me to have many different careers. Although I've been in business for 30 some odd years on my own, it's like I do many different things, and people are like, well, how could you be this and have worked at that and done? and I'm just saying, blame it on Uranus. I also remember during a particularly bad transit of Uranus, suddenly losing my job through a very quirky situation that turned out to be probably one of the best career things that ever happened to me. But at the time, it was quite devastating. As Uranus does sometimes pull the wool out from under your eyes. But I have, we've got a lot of air with Libra, South Node Gemini. And so the ability to multitask, to talk, to, be involved in many different things is easy. What is not easy is focus on self. And again, I don't think Neptune helps there, but that's something that has been there. My Pisces moon both gets me in trouble and helps me. I think people with a Pisces moon are easy marks for others if we don't have our guard up. But I also think the intuitive aspect of Pisces and Neptune has been extremely helpful in the work that I do. I often say to people, well, I see it. I just see it. I just see this stuff. And they're like, well, what do you see? And I remember my first, when I was learning about the charts, I'm like, well, yeah, you're saying all that, but I just look at it and I see it, and so I've learned to appreciate that Pisces moon. That's about all I've got on me.
Thank you. That was amazing. I made some notes while you were talking. Can you hear me? Am I all right to talk?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Listen, thanks so much for bringing this chart. First of all, we've got nothing but pairs: Jupiter, Pluto, Mars, Mercury, Sun, Neptune, Venus, Saturn.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's very weird. I love it because I've never seen anything like it. I've seen a lot of stuff, but I've never seen that. And then Pisces moon sitting way over there on the other side in opposition to Pluto and Jupiter, obviously. But I'm seeing these pairs. And, your search for tribe is the one that really leapt out at me, this longing for a tribal union, a group, a pair where people are all in the same idea zone, but not necessarily agreeing or, because you weren't looking for a tribe where everybody trotted along with a leader, but you're looking for a tribe where people were unconventionally attracted to the power that you have, and that you had to wait until you got into your older years, later years, not at 16 or 17 was not your highest moment in time. But yeah, and then your Sun Neptune conjunction, seeking the divine, forever seeking the divine in things, of finding the beauty in nature, the beauty in people, of seeking that out. The Venus Saturn saying, okay, well, it's never perfect, it never will be, and you've got to accept that. Your Venus is right on my Sun. It's interesting. 16. Yeah. And so I'm looking at this and saying, you've had to really come to terms with the fact that this is not a perfect life. It will not be, and that everything is paired up. And when you're pairing things up like this, and then the Pisces moon at 0, it's like being able to finally let go and let go and let God, as they say. It's really good. So it was only through the group and the tribe that you found through astrology that you found your actual tribal seeking, because that Jupiter Pluto was absolutely devastated by the lack of friendliness and happiness in school when you were a kid. And it was really hard for you.
Yeah.
Now you're old enough to have experienced enough and gone through almost every single transit we'll be looking at that. Gone through almost every transit that there is. You've grown up. You finally made it. Congratulations.
Well, we don't know about that. I also credit Vesta in the 12th house for giving me also my drive to learn astrology and connect with the divine.
Well, that's your tribe.
Yeah.
We are your tribe.
Anybody else in
Yeah, something that I noticed here, there's a few balsamic phase conjunctions. And then sometimes when I feel into the balsamic phase conjunctions, and then I look at something in the 12th house, and then I see a Pisces moon, like all these things about like the letting go and the endings of things, and like a deep invitation for like surrender to the divine, or this surrender to the eternal present moment. Like even you saying you like looked at the chart and you could just see it. It's like you just like be present and allow the divine to come through you so that you can see. And the sun is what sees, and it's in Scorpio, so you can see it in a really deep penetrating way, you know. So that's something that I like really could feel, just attuning to the chart.
My astrology teacher took a play off my last name and would call me Portal, because he's like, yeah, you get it, Portal. You get it, Portal. That's that Pisces moon. You get it. And can't tell you how I got it, but I knew I got it.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, because so many times, like even with the like idea of perceiving things as like being indecisive, I continuously get guidance to invite people to see and know that the gods keep saying like humans never have to be confused, because we can admit that we don't know and just be present. And when we do that, then things can truly come through in a like very divine, clear way. So yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you. Okay, if no one has anything, we could go to the transit.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm a lover of Pluto. I can remember writing in grammar school. I wish I'd kept it, like a 25-page paper on Pluto. I just was enamored with Pluto. So Pluto entering my 4th house, I always tell people, Pluto going through your house, whatever house it is, don't expect it to just sit there quietly. It's going to dig and demand that your secrets be exposed, whether you like that or not. So you can face it or you can curse it, but Pluto really doesn't care. He just keeps rolling along. So being in the 4th house, I normally interpret the 4th house as the house where you have to take off all your masks and be yourself. Yeah, it's home, it's roots, it's mother, but it's very primal to me. It's where, who we are at our core when we stare at ourselves in the mirror. And so Pluto transiting 4 is sort of a block or a stoppage of blocking the truth about yourself and the truth about how you want others to accept and deal with you. And it's sitting right on my chironic wound. So you're born with a chironic wound in the 4th house in Aquarius. You don't stand out at home. You are, your uniqueness, your talents, your ability to be anything is perceived as not existing. So Pluto there is forcing a reconciliation with that chironic wound. And, it could be, I fight the family members who still won't accept me, or I just say, I don't have time for this. And, but that's the reckoning that I feel Pluto is doing, that I have to be comfortable in my skin, whether it takes me another 65 years or not. But that is the call. And Saturn there, because, we had the Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter mushmash, as I call it, in December. So Saturn is still relatively close. I always see Saturn as authority. By whose authority do you live? Is it the tape in your head? Is it the family tape in your head? Is it the karmic tape in your head? But it's like gaining authority, and or not. I mean, it could be living by past tapes, or it could be your authority, your tape in your head. So I see those two as coming around, to force that reckoning of self. And Neptune, I'm not always pleased when Neptune goes into 6. I do have autoimmune. I'm not a medical astrologer by any means. So I'm just hoping that Neptune doesn't do anything crazy, because I know Neptune does deal with autoimmunity. And so I'm just hoping Neptune stays nice and spiritual and not goes funky there in the 6th. But I do normally like Neptune. I just want to be sure he's okay there. And then I like the Jupiter Aquarius on the moon, but just in the 5th house. I've been thinking, when this project is done, I've got to get back to writing my book. I've got to get back to expressing myself. And so I think that Jupiter and Aquarius will assist me in that fashion. And of course, Jupiter is the ruler of my North Node, Sagittarius. So, presenting my truth is a big part of Sagittarius.
Well, thank you.
Joan,
I'd like to say- Sorry.
So,
I'm
Michael?
sorry, is somebody else speaking? I can't hear.
No, I think you're good, Michael.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at your transiting Uranus, opposition of your natal sun and Neptune, and that the Uranus is opposition to the midpoint between your sun and Venus. So I'm seeing it's a time of powerful insights and inspirations fueled by new imaginations. And these are the fruits of your own transformation, whatever transformations you've been going through. And these aren't questions for you to answer. I'm just something to think about. Is there like any particular person that you feel empowered by, or challenged by? And it could just be what you were talking about, that you're triggered by people in general, but these triggers are taking you to a new level of becoming a living example of what you value and what what and how you bring truth, beauty, and love to the world.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed too, just because you spoke on the Neptune in the 6th house, something about Neptune in the 6th house, I often invite people to bring in what I call like vibrational medicine, which could be just sound, music, or just like learning an instrument and like practicing that on a daily basis. Just because Neptune and Pisces often have to do with music as a remedy. That's something that I feel like could be, you said something about Neptune playing nice, and it's like, I like to get Neptune to play nice by playing music for Neptune, right? So we're playing nice with each other,
I love that.
Yeah. And then even something that was just said about like your values and other people's values, the nodal opposition, it's in the 2nd and the 8th house. So like your values, other people's values. So that's just like a echo of what was already said, and then also coming to terms with things that were happening in the emotional identification based off of how you were emotionally nurtured or lack thereof when you were younger, and that like echoing also that Pluto in the 4th house again, and how we want to dig into like ancestral roots or undo the ancestral things that were occurring, and then even the 8th house being about inheritance, they're like the emotional inheritance and transmuting that as well. So that's just some reflections.
No, I appreciate that. I like the music of Neptune, and I also when Pluto started moving into 4, I did go back to working with someone who does ancestral healing. So it's very interesting that you would say that. Yeah. And if I was doing a client's chart and I would say, look at the nodes, the nodes are sort of flippy flopping on each other there. So I always say, what have you still what negative Geminis do you need to leave behind? And a lot of that is the anxiousness and the, always worried about saying the right thing to the right people, and as opposed to Sagittarius saying, just stick with your truth. So yeah, that nodal flip-flop is always an important aspect.
That's great, Joan.
No, thank you guys.
Is it okay for me to say something about this briefly?
Sure.
Well, you mentioned Neptune, and actually the transit of Neptune is actually trining your Venus-Saturn conjunction right now.
Mhm, mhm.
And this is going to bring a great deal of more spiritual and emotional content to the Venus-Saturn. It like loosens it up, because Venus and Saturn is pretty tight ass in a way.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah. And so what Neptune trying to it is helping you let go of the holding on to old values and old feelings that you have had in the past that didn't serve you well, and that you've actually, I mean, I see when Neptune makes transits to the natal planets that there's a kind of I don't care anymore about whatever the transit is about. In other words, I now no longer care whether people like me or not, and it's not really important anymore. That's not how you feed your self-worth. But not also, you've got Uranus at 8 Taurus opposite your natal Sun Venus midpoint.
Yeah.
Which shows that there's a major shift taking place, an earthquake, in fact, taking place between your value system and your purpose in life. And so that what Uranus is doing is it's trying to bring together in a very unusual and very original way your purpose in life and your value system, so that they will work together and operate. And it's interesting that the transiting moon is exactly on your natal Jupiter. So you're the most important person in the room right now. Yeah,
Which is so, no, it's true. You're very, very accurate. This just reared its head again today, this idea of satisfying people who have been not in my corner. And I'm like, I'm not fighting it anymore. I don't know.
Yeah. You don't really need to do any of that anymore. Part of it has to do with maturing, getting older, and and over a lot of things. But the nodal axis has just returned again to itself, and that to me is being born again, because the nodal axis is now in the same degrees, well, very close.
Close, yeah.
So, yeah. Where they were when you were born. So the south node and the north node are reversing themselves over your karmic connection to the world, and that you're now going to be able to face the parts of yourself that you could never face before, in order for you to be reborn, rebirthed. This is about rebirthing, isn't it? Because the nodal axis is very interesting in the sense that, I mean, I love the way Jeff deals with it. Myself, I really, but his work has been profound. But when I also think that when I look at the nodes, that I'm seeing because what the nodes are the intersection of the transit of the earth around the sun, and then the transit of the moon around earth. And so the intersection, it's almost logical that if you're about to be born, you would slip in that nodal axis and slip into planet Earth and become born. And so essentially, I laughed here because I made notes on it, that the nodal axis is that you're being born again. You're actually in a position now where you will give birth to yourself in a way which is really appropriate for your age, your time in life, your experience, and your learning, your education, and become a full-blown author and write yourself another book.
I appreciate that. I love the rebirth. I've never used that with clients, but I really think that's a beautiful way of putting it. And
it certainly is, isn't it? South node, north node, and the north node to the
I love that.
I mean, it really is. It's just a complete axial tilt towards rebirthing. And because the nodes are retrograde, it's already happened. Okay.
Oh, I love that.
So
Yeah.
you're already born again.
And not in the way that some people think.
Oh, no, but in the way that
Yeah.
we think.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not fighting this. I'm not fighting these people.
Nope. There's no need, is there? It's over.
Exactly. Yeah.
That part's over. Now it's about you in a very, very, very productive way. So I can almost say, Joan, that it's all about you.
Libra rising doesn't always say that, do they?
Oh, right, of course. Well, you certainly want to be liked. Well, good luck with this one. This is great.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. There's Michael.
Well, gosh, where to start?
Last
Well, see, looking at seeing that the moon is so prominent in my chart, first house, is something that's really carried me throughout life. I've also had a fairly traumatic childhood, even though I was the firstborn. I had three younger brothers who were all roughly a year and a half apart. My parents had me when they were 19. So by the time they had all four of us, they were 27 or so. I'm sure they were very crazy by that time. But I was just able to stay afloat above a lot of the craziness. And I just kind of stayed out of it. Though, I mean, it did affect me, especially after I was 9. My father started becoming violent and started drinking and stuff like that. But I did leave home when I was 17. And with my Uranus, which rules the sun that my moon is in, is right on my descendant. And it's conjunct my south node. And so with my Pluto in the 7th house too, I had lots of karma to deal with in the realm of relationships. And at the same time, I was one of all the unusual people that I would attract in my life. Yeah. And very creative people. I'm an artist myself, but I've always been around other artists, other forward-thinking people. I didn't do anything like helping to organize Woodstock, but I was born in Detroit, and I was involved with a anarchist group in Detroit. We did a lot of different things, anti-Vietnam at the time, and other things dealing with the local politics there. I'm still in touch with this group in Detroit, even though I live down here in Ecuador right now. But I still stay in touch with them. So with this really big need, this karmic necessity to work out things in the realm of relationship, and with my north-south node, first house, 7th house, Capricorn, Cancer, really finding my way, my own, my own person within relationships. It took me a while. I was always getting into, I gave way too much of myself in relationship in my early adult life. And this is echoed by the Venus-Saturn conjunction in Scorpio, showing something that really needs to be transformed. And to whatever degree that I've been changing this in my life, I've been really conscious of it since I was late teens. And, I did lots of therapy and stuff like that throughout my 20s and 30s. This holding back that I experienced, started being transformed into more really being how should I say, decisive, but determined, very defined in my values and what it is that I really stood for. And I mean, I always had that to whatever degree, but I've had to learn how to really craft that for myself. And with that Venus-Saturn conjunction in the 9th house, Scorpio, and with my sun in the 10th house and Jupiter in the 5th house, I've been involved with alternative education since the late 70s in Detroit, and then in the very early 80s, I became involved with Waldorf education, which I'm still involved with on a different level. So this is something that has been a big part of my life. With my Mars there, kind of a loose trine with my Moon, it's been a gift and a challenge. I've been in so many situations where I had to be the diplomat. I mean, of course, as a teacher, one is in that position a lot, especially with parents. But with Pluto in the 7th house, this is something that Jeffrey pointed out in his own, his writings and his talks. But I also had the fortune of having Jeffrey do my chart. That people of Pluto, and I found this to be true, that people, strangers, will just come up to me and start telling me very personal things. And there's something which is very humbling, and but it's also it's a knife edge. Either a place where I need to draw a line, or something in which I can just be totally open and have equanimity, and therefore being able to hone whatever skills in diplomacy I have in dealing with things. As a teacher, I was actually asked to help negotiate child rearing things between two divorced parents and their new partners. I was, the noon birth time that I have, that's my actual time. So I have the sun right up there near the midheaven in the 10th house. I've always been, I don't know, somehow always put into situations in which I've had, not just had to, but it would just kind of like naturally happen, where I would take on some kind of leadership position, or just be in the forefront of some activity with a group of people. So this has been a real learning experience for sure, all the way. And it's also been an experience of well, it's been learning in the sense of learning about what is leadership. It isn't, after a long time, I mean, really find out that leading really is serving. It's really about being a servant. So anyway, if somebody else has something to say about my chart, I too am not that used to talking about my chart.
No, it's funny. Yeah, Michael, I noticed two interesting things. Number one, you and I share Saturn, Venus, and Scorpio conjunction. So we must be born, we're both Pluto Leo babies with baby boomers. Yours is much closer.
Yeah.
And
I was born a few months before you, it looks like.
Okay. And you share, although you're a Pluto Leo baby like me, you do share Pluto Juno conjunction, as does Cameron. So I just found that interesting. Do you think your family stuff came from the moon in Aquarius being, mother, unique, different, plus your South Node is Cancer. So there's obviously a karmic connection to mother. And the Saturn thing, my father was not at all physically abusive because he grew up an abused child of an alcoholic father. So but he was not emotionally. Do you think that Saturn, Scorpio, with that Venus there, what blocks us from the Father?
Well, it was for me. And in fact, my father's sun was right on top of my Saturn.
Oh, oh,
And yeah, and you know, I mean, he did the best he could, you know, but he didn't really have a lot of, you know, he didn't have a lot of skills on how to be a healthy human being. He tried,
yeah,
but you know, alcohol destroys a lot of things. But
yeah.
you know, because of my Aquarius moon and my I think my Mars in Libra, I mean that gave me the strength to stand up to him. And I mean, I remember I was 17 or so. I don't know. I had to stand between him and my mother, you know, because he was physical and abusive towards her. And I don't know. It wasn't about that. It was about something else. I remember standing in the living room. We were face to face, just inches away from each other. And he was saying something, I don't even know what. And I was so mad. And I had my hands clenched, you know, and him, you know, being second generation Italian, you know, very macho.
Yeah, I hear you.
And he's like, oh, okay, go ahead, hit me. And, you know, I mean, he would have killed me, first of all, but it wasn't because I just looked at him and said, no, I'm not going to do that. He goes, why not? And, you know, I said, well, I don't want to be like you. And it totally changed everything, changed our relationship forever. Yeah. So I did have strength, you know, but I had a lot of restrictions on me that, you know, that I internalized, and it took me a long time to work through.
How did the Mercury, I mean, I always see Mercury and the sun, or Venus and the sun as being a charismatic indicator, someone who draws people to them. But your retrograde, did that hinder your teaching? How did you overcome that? Was it a socialization thing or a verbal thing?
Yeah, I never saw it as a detriment socially or anything. It for me, it was my mind. I was definitely more introverted, you know, and my mind is definitely more introverted. The Sabian symbol for my Mercury has, I don't remember it exactly, but it has something to do with an X-ray vision. So this is what's helped me in many ways. I can just, you know, I mean, this is part of Scorpio, right?
Yeah.
We can just kind of see through things.
Yeah.
So that's helped me being very focused on my attention and being able to see underneath the surface of things. That's helped my teaching.
Okay, thanks.
And it's, you know, it's quincunx my Jupiter, but it's, you know, trine my Uranus. So that definitely plays out with, you know, considering my astrology and other related things.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Should I make a comment?
Sure, please do. Anybody can.
I'm just sort of gripped here by your Venus-Saturn conjunction and 2 degrees of Scorpio. And I think that really addresses the issue of how you dealt with your abusive background and your father, because your value system is so unique and so yours. I mean, that's the thing about Scorpio that's so interesting is that, and I'm not sort of diminishing any of the other signs, but Scorpio people, and you're very much that, tend to be able to hold on to things that nobody else can. It's like being able to hold the hot end of the stick in the fire. It's being able to really, really grip and to stand their own in the end. I mean, because I mentioned that my own childhood abuse was really physical beating and so on, and emotion and psychological. Yeah, but see, what you have is the strength to put up with it. It's almost as if of anybody in the family, you were the one that was able to actually transmute this into something really positive, because there's a reincarnational kind of aspect, which I believe we do reincarnate in while we're still alive. Like if you live to be 90, you reincarnate maybe 60 times, you never know. But you have to reincarnate in your life, in your lifetime, in the transit of Neptune, is exactly trining that Neptune. I mean, the Saturn, Venus, Saturn at 2 Scorpio right now, in your natal chart, that's the one that helped, that kept you together, I think, pretty much, very much so. And also the capacity to detach emotionally and to be able to see the father as you grew with the moon in Aquarius. It's to actually begin to see your father as his problem, not your problem.
Yeah.
And so did you find that you actually were capable of doing that as you matured and got older, was to realize that his problem was his problem and it wasn't yours, even though he was abusive?
Yeah, I mean, for a while, like a lot of people, it was my part of my story, my abusive father, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah,
then,
well, yeah.
over time, I was able to just, be more objective about it. And there was a time I was going through a divorce, and I just called, I called my father and I just said, I just want to talk to you because you're my dad. And he really didn't know what to say. He listened and he didn't have much to offer, but I just felt like I needed to reach out, and it was for the complete healing for me, for my healing to do that.
Right.
And I'm so glad I did it, because it was just a few months later he died.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a good thing.
That's an incredible story. And when we look at your transits, wow.
Yeah.
I was checking them out too, looking at the Sun, Venus exactly at 5 degrees of Aries. It's absolutely beautiful, in opposition to your natal Mars. And so you're actually coming into your own power at this age, at this time in your life, because when you're facing off, because oppositions aren't negative, you can actually see an opposition much more clearly than any other aspect if you're actually considering how you would visualize it. So Sun, Venus opposite by transit to your natal Mars really shows that you're actually integrating and absorbing the nature of what Mars really means to you. Now, I wouldn't be able to tell you that, but you would then be able to say, well, that's true, because this is how I'm using my drive, desire, passion, ambition, aggression, assertion, all the various attributes that Mars embodies. So you really, and your Mars is right on my natal moon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because it's 7 Libra. So,
well, yeah, I thank you for saying that. I mean, that's really good. And that goes hand in hand. How Mars really, it represents what our conscious will, compared to Pluto. And, this Pluto and Saturn transit through Capricorn, sitting on my Chiron and then my ascendant for a while. And now Pluto is on my north node.
yeah,
Moon's in my moon, Saturn's on my moon. But it's so interesting because when Saturn went over my Chiron, I ended a 20-year marriage. I didn't end it, but it ended. Just ended. It was kind of a mutual thing. And so that happened, and that was just a few years ago. And then let's see, I have to get the sequence of this is then when Pluto hit my ascendant, I had decided I'm going like a initiatory voyage. I went on a 5-month trip to China and then Malaysia. And, I was doing some work there, teaching teachers, but I was just going to places I knew nobody. I didn't know the language, and I was traveling alone. And it was, I really needed to do that after a 20-year marriage. And so coming out of that, it was a huge change. And I felt, of course, very much more empowered, more centered. And then as not that long ago, as Pluto went over my ascendant, Saturn going over my ascendant and hitting my north node. So I see the nodes as these entryways for birthing, as you were saying, similarly. And I look on people's charts, I definitely see connections between parents and children in the nodes. And my mother died when Saturn hit my north node. And now as Pluto goes over my north node, I am going through a rebirth. I've been in education, Waldorf education, for a long time. I'm still involved, but I haven't been teaching full time in a little while. But so I've been teaching teachers in China and Malaysia. Right now, I'm teaching a high school class in Malaysia. I have a class later on today, and but I invested myself a few years ago in working towards, moving away from teaching and putting much more focus into my astrology. I've always, I've been into the astrology since the mid 70s, but I've been teaching. It's been I haven't been a professional astrologer in a major way. So now I invested myself to do this, and things are kind of working out. And so what I'm working on now is not only that, but I've done workshops where I'm developing these 4 to 12-day retreats, which includes, EA work, biography work, spiritual practice, and artistic experiences. So this really has to do a lot about surrender and trust this whole time. And now, as this moves further, I have remarried. I married someone from Malaysia, and they're here with me in Ecuador, her son. And so the surrendering part, learning how to surrender. And I never thought, I'd be a parent again. And here I am with a 12-year-old. And it's just, it's actually, quite a wonderful experience. And putting all my things that I've learned into it, slipping into 4th gear, so to speak. But everything's still changing with Pluto going through my 1st house and Uranus coming up to my IC this summer, as it gets about 2 degrees away from my IC. This could be, of course, it all depends on COVID restrictions, travel restrictions. We'll be moving back to Malaysia, and I have different job opportunities and different possibilities for doing my retreat work there, and it's just everything's just kind of opening up and happening and going in that direction. Though Uranus doesn't really enter into my 4th house until June 2022, but it doesn't have to be in the 4th house for the move to happen. So if you have anything else that you see related to anything that I just said, I would be more than happy to hear it.
I think what you were saying about Uranus and it transiting your IC, because how, it's not really that long a time between now and then, but that will be a really important period of time for you to shake off the very final vestiges of the early home environment. And your sort of the 16 degree of Taurus, Scorpio, ICMZ, it helps to bring in massive and very significant changes in your work, because the work becomes more inspiring for you as it hits the IC, and it will actually become more invested in your home based upon Uranus making the change, or at least you making the change with Uranus as it transits it. And so when I was looking at that, I thought that was pretty profound right there. And also too, the fact that we've got Neptune at 21 degree of Pisces, exactly trine your natal sun and within orb of your natal Mercury. This is where the spiritual side of life starts to become greater for you, not only with maturing, but also with your life as you've made it now, with the new wife and the 12-year-old son. It's like, you've transformed and transmuted into a much, much gentler man than you might have been before. And that you don't have to feel any, the kinds of a natural and healthy young male aggression that you needed in order to survive. But, seeing as today has got Sun Mercury or Sun Venus exactly opposite your natal Mars as we speak today. So we're really talking about you transmuting your energy and your massive intellect into something that really does suit you for possibly the rest of your life. So you're really looking now at this stage in time at the rest of your life. What am I going to be doing in 20 years? Well, what am I going to do in 10, 5 next year? So they're very important decisions that you're making now, my dear Michael. It's really important that you make them very wisely and in connection with your family. And I congratulate you on your survival as well.
Thank you. Yeah, just as a note, my progressed, my directed solar arc Pluto is right on top of Venus and Saturn at 3 degrees.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
That Venus-Saturn conjunction is really tight. And it's no wonder that it's no wonder that you experienced such violent early home environment. It's no wonder. I mean, that definitely addresses how it goes very, very deeply into the body, because Scorpio, though it's a water sign, it's also a body sign. It talks about how we interject our pain into our bodies, and it can affect parts of our body like lower back if you've been carrying too many burdens, or depending on the part of the body, you can almost tell what planet it is that you've been sort of either not paying attention to or abusing. So I can see your transition going to be very, very positive and very consciously done.
That's my intent.
Good. Well, that's a good attention.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add with all that being said, and just feeling into like a lot of Aquarius Uranus energy here, especially with Uranus on the South Node, just coming to all these things with and you do sound and it feels like you have like a lot of intelligence and just like cultivating a practice with the nervous system, just tending to the nervous system is just so important when we go through all those things when we're younger. And then like Erin was saying, the things being like in the body, so just making sure the nervous system has the ability to shake off, essentially shake off the ancestral or like the things that came from the roots, with that Uranus coming to the 4th house, it's like even like literally shaking sometimes feels really good for me, but like just getting the nervous system to be calm enough to shake the ancestral things off feels like it's highlighted for me right now. So just adding that in.
Yeah, thank you. I've just given up coffee, and black tea, which is just really amazing for me.
Oh dear, oh dear. Now I feel guilty.
How can you do that? Oh my goodness.
I say the same thing.
Oh, that just sent a shiver through me.
I know. What would I do without my 2 cups in the morning?
You're right.
Plus. Well, see, that's what Pluto in the 1st house does. On his node, no less.
No, when you're born with Pluto transiting your ascendant, you make major life changes that will obviously really affect the rest of your life, because it's not just a Mars transit over your Venus for a few weeks, but it's Pluto really dragging your ascendant with it for a few years more.
I find people with Pluto natally in the 1st house and I actually have clients with Pluto and Uranus conjunct in the first house. And I have to tell you, that's a tough combination. I mean, they just don't know which way to go. They're always being pulled to change, be different. I feel very badly, right? And I see that coming. I'm like, oh man, that's a tough life.
I've come across a lot of drug addicts with that combination in the first house.
Yeah. And other kind of addicts. I have one woman who's sort of addicted to sex, or men, or the approval thereof, because they're, it's tough.
Okay, well, thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this panel. I'd like to thank all of you so much, and thanks, Erin, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah. Listen, thank you, Linda, for setting all this up. You're absolutely amazing.
Yes, thank you. It was fun.
This has been great. Thanks so much,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you.
Everybody's wisdom.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everyone.
We need Cameron's website.
Thanks, Erin, Joan. And
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. What is your website, Cameron?
It's www.cadreamplanet.com. cadreamplanet.com.
I love that.
Okay, thanks for spotting that, Joan, and I'm sorry, Cameron. Okay, thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.